Hello and welcome to Underlords Universe. This is a place where we gather and discuss things that inspire us to be creative in our own right in something we call Underlords of the Overworld. And more on that at the end, because if you stumbled across this channel, you probably did so because you saw something about Dream Theater and the new Dream Theater record, which is called Parasomnia. And uh, my brother Brent here, the Broken Man. He's joined me today. He joins me on most of this stuff. Sometimes we have some of our other uh, creative consultants and contributors along the way. But today it's just Brent and me. We're going to do a little discussion, conversation about this new record. And if you're a Dream Theater fan, make a comment below. It's kind of blowing up in the Dream Theater world, this album is. And if you're new to us, please like, subscribe, do that whole thing. That'd be really cool. And we're going to make this kind of conversational about this new record. Brent, you've listened to it how many times now, you said?
I've listened to the whole album through twice.
Okay.
And then, of course, I think I told you before, when the first single came out, I listened to that, and I didn't listen to anything else purposely until I got the record.
Okay. Yeah. Which makes sense to me because you wanted to hear pretty much the whole thing fresh, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. I got a thought about that too, before when we get into it. But yeah, so I think what we're going to do here is we're going to just, if by the way, if you'd like to just jump ahead to kind of some of the track by track stuff, you can feel free to do that. But I wanted to ask you, because this obviously Dream Theater has been around for a long time, and before we get into this album itself, do you remember when you got into Dream Theater or who got you into Dream Theater, how that worked? Um, because we're both longtime listeners of this band.
That's a really good question. I think it might have been in college. See, 89 through 93 was when I was an undergrad. And our friend Mike maybe still is a big Dream Theater fan. Um, he might have gotten me into the band initially back when we were in school together.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm thinking maybe the early 90s, 90, 91, 92-ish, thereabouts,
Okay.
possibly.
And yeah, you're right. Mike was a huge Dream Theater fan. And
Hmm.
I remember 94, summer 94, Matt and I were going up to Iowa State to kind of check out the campus and stuff.
Hmm.
And we tuned into the campus radio station, and they were playing, it was either Metropolis, part one, or it was Take the Time. One of those two. I can't remember exactly. And
Hmm.
and I remember thinking it for some reason it like popped in my head. Oh, wait a minute, this is the band that had that Pull Me Under song that I remember seeing on MTV.
Right.
And I thought this is incredible. So I got it, and that was maybe 6 months, 8 months or so before Awake came out. And I remember going to the North Grand Mall in Ames that fall once we were, uh, actually, students at Iowa State, going to the mall and seeing Awake on the new release kind of shelf on the wall. So yeah, we both would have gotten into Dream Theater then with the release of their first major label album, um, Images and Words. That would have been out. That would have been
Right.
the current record, and then the first new album for us would have been Awake.
Yeah, I think Awake might have been the first record of theirs that I bought.
Probably was because it was the first. Uh, well, I bought Images and Words because it was already out. It was hard to find When Dream and Day Unite. Um,
Yes.
so so the first new album that I bought would have been their third album, second major label album, Awake, and I've basically been a first day buyer of everything that I don't think there's an album that they've put out that I have not gotten on the first day. So.
No, and you have a lot of the like the live the ex those
Oh, the official
uh,
bootlegs.
yeah, you have all those, right, and all that extra. You have a lot more stuff than I have, but yeah, with regard to the studio releases, I think you and I have both been release day buyers ever since then.
Yep.
So for 30 years, we've been
Yeah.
pretty much Dream Theater train of thought for 30 years.
Yeah. And we've both seen them several times. I counted it up before. Unless I'm missing one, I've seen Dream Theater 9 times. Um, five with Mangini, four with Portnoy. So the earliest was when they opened it for ELP and Deep Purple in '98.
Mm. Oh yeah, yeah, that was an outdoor show.
Yep, that was at what's Tinley Park, Chicago.
Yeah,
So
that was great.
yeah. All right. So at any rate, so here we are, 30 whatever years later, and new Dream Theater album is out, and of course it's the return of Mike Portnoy, and of course there's the album art, which is getting some flack. Some people are noting little inconsistencies that might indicate some AI work here, which is a little disappointing given that Hugh Syme is an incredible artist. But you know, it is what it is, I guess. There's the
Yeah,
right little
yeah,
old man eyeball there.
yeah.
The eyelid rather. I really kind of like the image underneath
I
the
do too.
I think it's cool.
I thought I thought I thought the imagery and the packaging was quite good. Very
Yeah,
dark, which I think dark and mysterious. It kind of matches the vibe and the feel of the record.
yeah. I think that if you got the super deluxe box set, the vinyl has that as the cover, but
Oh,
only in the super deluxe is the vinyl, which I think that's a pretty cool image.
that is
The
cool.
one thing I don't really like, there's actually a couple things about the art that I don't like, aside from some of the little nuances that are maybe AI generated, is I don't get the it's like the ants. It's like,
Oh,
is this harkening back to systematic chaos? I mean, and if it is, why? I don't get that. Maybe somebody has a thought about that. Um, the other thing that I don't really like about the art is I think some of the individual band pictures are a little on the cheese side because they're clearly photoshopped in. And
oh
I
yeah,
think it's
yeah.
a I think just this is a little dorky, but I think it's a little inconsistent to have the Johns with their modern instruments. John Mayung's there with his music, his Ernie Ball Music Man bass, and then there's Jordan sitting at a decrepit old piano. I just don't like the inconsistency on that. And
Hmm.
then the other thing I don't like is the full band pick. Um, Again, it's the Photoshop type kind of thing that's
Mhm.
bugging me because it's like, dude, there are some really great old, stately places, mansions, etc. around. I mean, heck, even in Des Moines, there's the Salisbury House. It's like go on location and take a cool picture, you know?
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm kind of being nitpicky there. The just to, why don't we just kind of hit just track by track? Um,
Sure.
but before we do, are there obvious high and low points for you on this, or is it pretty consistent straight through? I know you've said you've only listened to it a couple times. I've listened to it maybe 5 times, so not too many more than you at this point.
Hmm.
And
Uh,
and before you answer that, I just want to say, to me, high and low points might change as the album grows on me. I mean, I'll continue to listen to this on and off. I remember when the last album came out, View from the Top of the World, that album did not, I thought it was great musically, but nothing was real memorable. It just didn't click with me for the longest time. But now it does. So,
mhm.
some of their stuff can, a lot of this stuff can be kind of a growing, things grow on you and your opinion might change and so on and so forth. So I think there's a bit of a disclaimer there, going into this. If, you know, say, oh, this song or that song's kind of, who knows, maybe 6 months from now, it might have a different view. So this is kind of first impressions as a review. So
Right.
your first impressions, are there any obvious highs and lows for you on this?
Um, yes and no. And to piggyback off what you said, also with Dream Theater, there's a lot to digest. It's not like you're listening to an album full of 4-minute songs. There's a lot
Right.
going on. So yeah, like you, this is my initial impression. And if we talk about it in 6 or 8 months or at the end of the year, which we probably will to some degree, my thoughts might be a little bit different. But right now, I think it's a consistent record. There's two tracks that I rated the highest. So for me, I wouldn't say they're super much higher, better than the rest of the material, but two tracks rated higher than the rest of the
What
album.
what are the two that rated the highest for you?
The two that rated the highest for me were Dead Asleep and Bend the Clock.
Interesting, because okay, so
Excuse me, Brian. I misspoke.
okay,
Uh, no, wait. So I check my notes, make sure. Yes, Dead Asleep and Bend the Clock.
okay.
Yep.
So those are the high points for you.
Yes.
Interesting. I know a lot of fans are saying "Bend the Clock" is one of the high points on the record, and maybe even a high point in their career. We'll come back to that track as we go through it, but it's funny because to me, "Dead Asleep" is the low point on the record.
Really.
Yep. Yes. Um, and I mean, excluding, like the "Are We Dreaming," which is, not a
And
song. Um, yeah. But we know
I
we'll
wouldn't
get
have
to
guessed
that.
that. That's
So
interesting. I would not have guessed that. I'm surprised to hear that. But
yeah, actually, Midnight Messiah and the Shadow Man incident are the two high points for me.
oh,
So
I got a problem with Midnight Messiah. This is going to be interesting because yeah, we don't agree.
you
We
got
don't
you
agree.
you got a problem with Midnight Messiah?
I got a problem with Midnight Messiah, man. A big problem.
All right, okay. All right.
Big
Well, it's
problem.
about time. Well, let's take this, track by track then.
All
Um,
right.
okay. So, In the Arms of Morpheus, great title, by the way. I mean, and
Yeah.
very fitting given the theme of the album. I mean, anybody who's tuned into this probably knows it's a thematic album where each track is, it's a standalone thing. It's not a story, but the common theme is related to, well, various forms of parasomnia. So, um, I get a little bored at this point with overtures to albums. It's kind of like it's almost like it's been done too much.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, I mean, I think it's good. I like it. There's nothing I dislike about it. I do think the opening is the best part of it. That opening riff it's so thick, it's such a beefy riff. And I like how they have that kind of alarm underneath it. And the rest of it's fine, but it's just the very opening that I think is the best part of it. So yeah,
Okay. So,
good tune. But other than that, listen to it and then move on to the next.
okay. So here's a question for me when it comes to an album that starts like this. I think the most important aspect of it is whether it sets the tone for the rest of the record. Is it a good template for the rest of the record? So, in your estimation, do you think that this track does a really good job kind of laying out where the journey is going to take you as a listener as you go through the rest of the album? I think
Oh,
that's really
yeah.
important for a song like
I,
this.
I I think it really works on that level for sure. I do. I
Okay.
and I'm glad they didn't call it like Parasomnia Overture. I'm glad they came up with,
Now,
a title that's yeah, more more specific. But I do think it sets the tone really well, and I think from this point forward, it really, you know, with one exception, I think it kind of just kind of elevates. So I think it's good. I think it's good in that regard. Yeah.
okay, okay, I would agree. I think it's like you said, thick is a good word to describe it. I think the whole production is quite thick. Um, Heavy. In my notes I wrote the word claustrophobic. I think is a way to kind of describe the feel of the record, and so I think from the beginning of the record, the sound effects as you get into the track, you kind of, I think it does a good job of setting the mood. It's a good mood setter, if you will. So I would agree. I didn't give it a really super high grade because it's more like an overture. There's no vocal with it.
Hmm.
Um, but for what it's intended to do, I think it does a good job. So I
Yeah.
think it's a good table setter.
Yeah. Okay. And then Night Terror, which was the first song released. And at this
Mm,
point, I just want to say, I think personally, especially for an album that is intended to be listened to start to finish as an experience, and that's what they say, I
right.
think it's a mistake to release almost 30 minutes of it before the album comes out. I would not have done that. And I know that,
Yeah, and that's
you had a little bit more of the self-discipline to just not listen to it. I
yeah.
couldn't do that. And I wish I hadn't listened to songs like Night Terror or Broken Man and stuff so many times before the album came out because the familiarity with those songs, it just makes it an uneven listen in that regard. As far as the song itself, though, um,
Mm,
I think it's got great riffing in it. I think it's got all of the parts just work. It's a solid song that everything fits together. I think it's got some really cool keyboards that are in the verses. If you listen to it on headphones, that kind of get
mm,
a little lost in the mix. Um, you know, and to that point, I just want to say I think the best mix on any Dream Theater album is actually Distance Over Time.
okay.
That's not to knock Andy Sneap. I mean, this is a great sounding record. I think the bass comes out a lot more prominently when I'm listening on a good set of headphones than when I'm in my car, for example. Um, but so I think that there's some things in there that, listening in the right kind of system just kind of pop a little bit more. But the thing about the structure and the melodies of Night Terror is it's like, yeah, that's Dream Theater. I mean, when I heard the song, it's like, okay, it's Dream Theater. I wasn't blown away. That's not to say that I don't really like the song, because I really like Dream Theater. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
sounds like Dream Theater, you know. Um, but I think it's a really good song. It's not a song I would go to and say, okay, yeah, that's really, you know, a gem necessarily in their catalog. I mean, so it's a relative comment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would note that I think it has maybe the best riff on the record. It's a very Black Sabbath riff. I could hear that riff, the main riff on a Sabbath album. I think it's a very, um, yeah, it's a very Sabbathian, is that a word? Riff.
Sabathian, sure.
Um, I really like on my notes, I wrote down that I really like the extended bridge and the solos in that
Hmm.
song. I think that I think contrasts really nicely with the ominous guitar riff, the down tune, heavy, thick riff. Um, and like you said, it's very Dream Theater. Um, so for it being the first song with vocals on the record, I think it's a good lead song. And it is this
Hmm.
is the only song I listened to before the record came out. I heard Night Terror once or twice because I think it was the lead single, if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
and that was it. So I didn't really know a whole lot about the record because this was all I'd listened to. But I think Night Terror is quite good.
Yeah. If I could make a comparison, I remember very vividly when Untethered Angel got released from Distance Over Time. And I remember thinking, okay, it's a Dream Theater song, you know? It's like,
Yeah,
and not to be dismissive about it. I mean, that's actually a compliment, you know? It's like,
yeah,
this is just solid standard Dream Theater. Boom. There you go. Um, and sometimes it's those songs that have to grow on me because I'm on the outset a little likely to dismiss it. It's like, oh yeah, sounds like Dream Theater. okay, what else are they doing? And then I kind of go on to something else on the record and focus on those other things. Um, I love Untethered Angel. I think it's a great tune, and I think Night Terror is it's again it's just solid Dream Theater, but it's not
Yeah.
anything that makes me kind of go, oh wow, that's different, that's unique for them.
Okay, and that's a good point because I think for me, and we'll get into this further, and that kind of sums up quite a bit of this record. Yeah, that's really good. That's Dream Theater, but it doesn't really, it didn't blow me. Night Terror didn't blow me away. Like, it didn't blow me out of my shoes. And I was like saying, wow, holy crap, that's like the greatest thing I've ever. There wasn't that, but it's good. And of course, with them, the bar is set pretty high, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
the bar is high.
And it's like, is it really a bad thing when you hear a band and you go, yep, that's them, you know,
No.
right? Okay. So moving from Night Terror to A Broken Man, I actually like A Broken Man slightly more. I think that opening riff, that really kind of frantic riff that opens A Broken Man, I think that feels a little different. I mean, the song itself is very Dream Theater, but that kind of opening riff seems a little different for Dream Theater to my ear. Um, I think the bass riff that's in the second verse, it goes through, a few measures and then the guitar starts to kind of do it in unison. I think that's one of the just killer moments on the record, honestly. Um, and then the guitar solo. I mean, a lot of people are correctly pointing out how much the guitar solo in A Broken Man just sounds like Steve Morse. And it's like John Petrucci channeling his inner Steve Morse there, and it's
Um,
such a good guitar solo. Um, and but then there's these little nuances, like there's like a sitar sound that's coming out of the last verse that kind of goes into from the last verse into to the last chorus, this little sitar thing. And
mhm.
so while I really like Night Terror, Broken Man, I think to me kind of just clicks a little bit more on the ear candy element. There's a little bit here that's a little different. Um, the little bits that they haven't quite done before. I like that.
Yeah, I also made a note about the guitar solo with an exclamation mark after it. And you're right, I've heard people talk about the comparison to Steve Morse.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's one of John's better solos on the record. Not that he plays bad solos, but a more memorable solo. I mean, he can do a lot of things technically, and he can shred. But a lot of his playing I like best is when he slows it down and he's melodic or even bluesy a little bit on this record. And the
Yeah.
solo on A Broken Man is really, really good. And I also just made a note that I really like. I think the bridge of the song is a little jazzy.
Hmm.
And sometimes they can do some of that stuff and it doesn't always work for me.
Hmm.
And when I listen to one of their records for the first time, I'm kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, okay, when are they going to do some cornball jazz hands thing, this a ragtime thing or something that I don't really
Oh,
like?
yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's really none of that on this record. But I do think the bridge is a bit jazzy, and it really works nicely within the context of the song
Hmm.
and the context of the album as a whole. So those were the comments that I made in my notes. And probably if I had to pick, I would probably pick A Broken Man over Night Terror. But I think both of those are really solid songs.
Okay.
So,
We moved from there to Dead Asleep. And I have, at Dead Asleep, the subject matters is interesting. Um, as far as I understand, it's actually inspired by a true story,
hmm.
about a guy who had sleep disorders and apparently was put on trial for for strangling his wife.
Oh,
And
okay.
so but in this kind of fictionalized version of it, it's um, a murder. I think. I mean, there's a knife pictured in the artwork and stuff. So, um, it's the subject matter is so dark, and I think the music works for the subject matter, and I think it's a good song. Um, the thing about it, though, for me, is Dead Asleep to me, to my ear, lacks a melodic hook. like I have no problem listening to it. It's fine. It's a perfectly fine song, but it's nothing in that song is an earworm. Nothing sticks in my head. Um, so that's why
That's it.
that's the main reason for me why I rank it a little bit lower than the rest of the rest of the songs on the record. I do think that there's some pretty cool stuff at the beginning. I like the chordal pattern, the little kind of violin sound, which I'm assuming I didn't see any credits for actual violin players. It sounds really, really real, but I'm assuming it's Jordan. Um,
Yeah.
you know, um, and speaking of Jordan, he does a keyboard solo in the song. And as far as some of his keyboard solos go, this one just it doesn't sound terribly inspired to me. Maybe that'll change as I listen to it more. But yeah, it's just not. It just doesn't have the memorable melodic hooks that some of the rest of the songs do for me.
All right. Well, I'm going to counter that with I I really loved how the song starts with the light and shade, the kind of the beautiful intro part that goes heavy, then it goes back to being you know subdued. So I like juxtaposition there. I use the word, like I said, beautiful and heavy. I think those
Mhm.
the intro really works in that regard. And I think this is one of John's finer guitar solos on the record too. I think it's a nice bluesy solo. Um, and one of my favorite parts of the song is you mentioned Jordan's keyboard solo. I don't dislike the solo, and you didn't say you disliked it, but what I really liked is the driving riff underneath the solo. That for me was a very memorable piece of the song.
On
My
Jordan
least,
on Jordan's solo.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna make note of that because I'm gonna go back. Next time I listen to it, because I kind of want to hear what you're focusing on. So,
yeah. I mean,
okay.
actually, during the key solo, I made a note of it, but my bigger note was the riff under the solo
Hmm.
really sold me on that part of the song.
Okay.
And
I'll pay
interestingly
more.
enough, yeah, my least favorite part of the song is the chorus. I found the chorus to be a little bit limp. The vocal a little uninspired. I was dead asleep. It's a pedestrian chorus, but I think the rest of the song is so good that I can kind of overlook that part of it. But
Okay.
love the guitar solo, love the driving riff under the keys solo. I really like the intro. You mentioned the chordal progression. I really like that. So I quite like the whole song. I think it's one of the better songs on the record. And
Okay.
there's the chorus notwithstanding, I can live with that. It's I think it's one of the better tracks on the album.
Okay. Interesting. So, yeah, I'm gonna go back and listen to Dead Asleep again with some of your thoughts in mind. Like the riff under Jordan's solo and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think, and by the way, folks, for anybody who's still with us out there, this is why we like to do these things as conversations because somebody else, in this case, my brother, oftentimes hears something that I don't, and just by pointing it out, kind of makes me go, oh, listen to that again, and I think that just makes the listening experience um, n not just a social thing, but one of just new discoveries. So,
yeah, and vice versa. I mean, I told a mutual friend of ours one time I made a comment and it wasn't intended to be a criticism. I just said, "Well, you and I hear things differently," and
hmm
he got kind of offended by that. And I've always said you can listen to music or you can hear music.
hmm
There's it's two different things. But when we're talking and discussing these things, I'm like jotting down notes and I'll
hmm
go back to some of these things and listen for some of the things that you mentioned as well. So yeah, like you said,
yeah.
that's one of the reasons we like to do this because we don't always hear the same things, especially when it's new and fresh. We've only listened to it, a handful of
Well,
times.
there's so many things to take in, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
it's
I mean,
sensory overload oftentimes with these guys.
well, and never mind just the song structure, the melodies, etc. But when you're especially if you're listening, like on headphones, or if you're listening in a spatial room that where you have speakers, it's like, how are things panned? how are things, with respect to the mix, and it's like, that's part of the fun of all this, I think, is, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
and I will never listen to an album only on one system or in one way, because you miss things doing it
Mhm.
that way. So, um, yeah, okay. So, um, Dead Asleep. Any other thoughts on Dead Asleep, or you want to move on to Midnight Messiah?
Oh, let's go to Midnight Messiah.
So, to me, Midnight Messiah is one of the highlights of the record. I think the chorus is great. I think
Mhm.
it kind of comes out of left field, like, oh, I was not expecting that. I love the the just the overall change from the verses to the chorus and the way that they do that. And I think I saw Mike had said that they actually had to change the number of beats in that pause to get the words in just right, which I thought was just kind of interesting from a compositional standpoint. I think that one of the coolest parts, you're talking about like little ear candy bits. There's a kind of a post chorus in that song that has that Petrucci's doing these like dive bombs on the whammy in between the lyric, and it's like, oh, that's so cool. Especially near the end of the track, like the last chorus and then the last pre-chorus, there's these cool dive bombs just right in between each line, and it's like that that's cool. It's just a little tiny nuance that really just helps make the song to just elevate it, you know, from a really good song to, I think, a great song. So I'm going to say Midnight Messiah is a great song. And
Hmm.
it's the only song that Mike wrote lyrics for on this
Mhm.
record, and as I understand it, it's about a guy whose normal everyday life is just kind of, yeah, and he just can't wait to go sleep at night because in his dreams he's just kind of like a superhero. That's what I understand the song to be about. It's so I just kind of like everything about it, but you said otherwise.
Yeah, you know, what did I write in my notes? Not a fan of the chorus. It's
Oh, see, and this is where, folks, this is where I can be right and he can be wrong.
no Midnight Messiah. No, not a fan. And when I heard the segue from the verse to the chorus, you commented that they kind of work together, even though they're completely different. For
Hmm.
me, they don't work together. It's like it doesn't work. And it's interesting that you talk about how they had to massage that a bit to make it work, because this would be a fascinating, if they had a DVD on the making of this record, I'd love to see it, because I'd like to know kind of what went on behind the scenes with some of these songs. But I gave this song a 3. I give it 3 stars, but I do not like the chorus. It's just it got stuck in my head after when I got done with the record. All I could hear in my head was the chorus, and I didn't like it. Um,
Well,
yeah, I
and,
just
and that's the worst kind of earworm, when you don't like
yeah,
something and it gets stuck in your head. Now, but just totally different from you, I actually love that chorus. I just,
I do not like it.
yeah, I think it's
I
I think it's the high point of the record.
to me it's this is gonna sound bad, and I might catch some flack for this. It's almost like I thought the chorus was almost like lazy songwriting. It just I expect more from them. Now I'm sounding like a snob, right? But that was not. No, you made a good point. I didn't expect that. That I didn't either. And but
Hmm.
you what you didn't expect, you liked it. I didn't expect it, and I kind of cringed a bit. I was like, I don't know about that. That's not.
Interesting.
But it goes to show you how two people who agree on. I'd say we probably agree on 85% of the music that we listen to.
Probably, yeah.
This is probably one of those 15%, part of the 15% that we don't. I'm not saying it's a bad song. I'm just saying that it's probably one of my least favorite songs on the record. For the full disclosure, none of the songs got anything less than a 3,
Hmm.
and this is one of my 3 stars. So it's an okay song, but the chorus, man, that just I probably docked it a half a point just for the chorus, half a star.
Well, and like you said, you hear music differently, and music, we're talking about, you know, everything that we hear is processed um, in our brains, right? It's like how your temporal lobe, um, you know, processes auditory stimuli, and there's a bit of a mystery to how and why we react to different, to music differently, which is kind of an interesting concept, but um, clearly this is an example where we're hearing the same thing, but we're reacting, very, very differently to it.
And I'll go back and listen to it again, keep in mind some of the things that you said, because that might change my opinion on it. Because usually, if there are things about a song that I really, really like, they tend to outweigh the things that I like less.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
and I know what you're saying, tend to, but there are situations though where it's like, because I won't give it away when we do like a Dream Theater album ranking, we'll talk about it. But there's an album of Dream Theaters that has several songs where there are things about each song that just they just lower the they just lo it just lowers everything. Um,
Yeah, it
so it
happens.
you know it does happen for sure. But for
Yeah.
me, for me, Midnight Messiah was a high point on the record. So
Okay. All right.
um, Are We Dreaming is next, which it's fine as it is. It's cool as a cool little segue, but that's kind of all it is, just a segue. So um, I don't have anything to say about it other than that. So
Me
uh,
either. I just kind of put, yeah, like you said, it's like a connective piece.
yeah,
It's what, a minute and a half.
yeah. And then Bend the Clock, which is getting a lot of attention as being, a really great um, Dream Theater track. I,
Yeah.
I personally, I love Petrucci's guitar tone in the very beginning of the song.
I do
Um,
too.
I like when the riff comes in. It's a great, just kind of rock riff. It's one of those moments where it's like they're not so proggy, they're just more on the rock side of things,
Mhm.
which I think works really well in the flow of the record. I think that riff actually works really, really well with the piano in there.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm a little torn on the fade out.
Okay. You're mentioning some of the things I also have in my notes. Yeah.
Go fire away.
Well, I love the intro guitar. I love the guitar tone. It's a beautiful guitar sound. I love the riff that comes in after the first vocal part.
Hmm.
Um, I love the soloing. I love it. I don't
Yeah.
like the fade out. It's probably my favorite song on the record, but I wish they could have just given it a proper ending. So if John could have continued soloing and they could have done something to kind of finalize it, or maybe crescendo it and then build it to something and then go into the last track on the record. The fade out is anticlimactic for me, even though sometimes with guitar solos in an outro that fades out, it's very effective. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I just thought, man, they could have done so much. They could have done more with that.
It's funny
I
because
I feel.
that was my initial feeling as well. I don't, this is one of those things where the fade out, I might just kind of grow to accept it and
Yeah.
maybe even quote unquote like it, but I don't know if I'm ever going to love it. Um, I did see a little thing where John and Mike talked about how some songs they just, you know, they just feel like they should fade out. And I don't disagree with them on that. Where I disagree with them on that is that I don't think this is the song that calls for it. I agree with you. I would like to
Yeah.
have seen just a proper ending to this song. That would have been my preference.
I
Um,
think a yeah, I think a proper ending using the soloing would really like build it up, and then you can pull it back when you
mhm.
begin the epic piece on the record. As it is, it ends kind of limply, and you kind of just meander into the Shadow Man incident. I think you could have built, because Bend the Clock starts really softly with that beautiful guitar intro.
Mhm.
So if they would have built it up and had a really big climactic ending, I think the song was good enough that it could have really deserved that kind of of treatment. I think it would have been better for it. That's just me.
I no, it's me too. I mean I agree with that. Um, and I do agree also that this is the solo on Bend the Clock is a great example of John really being emotive. And
Yeah,
sometimes I wish he'd be more like that in his soloing. Not to say that his kind of pyrotechnics aren't great. They are, but I think he's so much more than that. And I think the soloing on this song really shows that. And
I
there is some real, you know, you know, guitar pyrotechnics in that solo as well, but I think it's evenly balanced. And I think that if they did not fade the solo out like that, I think they really could have put an exclamation mark on that, you know.
Yeah,
He could have gone because he does kind of near the end of that solo, he really starts just firing away.
yeah,
And but he could have
yeah.
just could have really brought it back into that emotive element right at the
Yep.
end to give it a proper ending. But you know,
Yeah,
they made a different decision. You know, John produced the record, and you know, ultimately, you know, he made that call. Um, you know, you can say, "Who am I to question that?" And it's like, well, I'm a listener, and
yeah, you're the
you know,
consumer.
so
You're the fan. I mean, and I'm sure
yeah,
if you said, "Hey, from a song from," because you know, we write our own songs, not that we're Dream Theater, but you think about these things, it would be a good question for him. It's like, John, this is the only song on the record that has a fade out.
yeah.
Why?
Well,
And the answer, the answer, you kind of you already
yeah,
talked about it, but maybe the answer also is, well, we couldn't think of a way to resolve this. We just thought, hey, the solo is really good. Let's just go ahead and do a fade out with the solo, and that'll kind of segue into the next piece, which we're going to have end the record, because
yeah,
you and I also talk about the sequencing on the record being really important,
oh
and we
yeah.
haven't talked about that for this record, but I'm sure we will. Maybe it's as simple as that. I don't know. Or maybe it's we couldn't come up with an ending. So we
It's
just
hard to imagine that these guys who can write
I,
anything, right,
I
could not
know, I
come up
know,
with.
I
So,
know.
you know, I think, you know, the answer that I saw them give was they just felt like that this song felt like it should fade out. And I
Mm.
mean, John even said something to the effect of, well, you know, it had to be kind of a long fade out because there were certain parts of the solo he really wanted to have in there and
Yeah.
everything. And it's like,
Well,
okay, you know, then then how about
full
this?
disclosure,
Then
but
how's this for an idea? Don't fade it out.
yeah, well, full disclosure, the fade out could have been a lot longer too. It could
It
have
could have been
been,
longer, sure. Yeah, right.
it's not a particularly lengthy fade out. It could have gone on for
Mhm.
easily 15, 20 seconds longer with more
Yeah,
soloing. I
could have.
would have been completely
Yeah.
fine.
But
So
I do think it's a really good I think it's a really, really good song. And
yeah,
you know, part of me wanted to say, you know, at first it was like, oh, I think people are kind of overstating this song and stuff. But the more I listen to it, the more I kind of say, yeah, you know, it's really good. Really good.
and didn't James write the lyrics on Bend the Clock? Did he
Yeah.
only? I think he.
He wrote
So
Bend the Clock and Broken Man.
right, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yep.
If I had to pick, I would say Bend the Clock right now is probably my favorite song.
Okay. All right. Well, that leads us to the Shadow Man incident, which,
Yeah,
if you're not aware, this is about an incident involving a Shadow Man.
yeah, it is.
It is. And, you know, the lyrics kind of cool, but as a song, as an epic, you know, it's a lot to take in, as a lot of their epics are. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I'm kind of when I hear an epic like this, I always think, well, how does this stand up to, you know, the other kind of 20-minute ish long epics that they've done, you know, Change of Seasons or Octavarium or whatever. And um, I do think this is a high point on the record. Honestly, I think I'll give you my initial impression. My initial impression when the song kind of came in with that thing at the beginning, I thought to
Hmm.
myself, this is way too much like Dance of Eternity. Um, or is it Dance of Eternity? It's I'm sorry, the opening on not Dance for help me folks out there. Overture 1928 from Scenes from a Memory.
Oh, scenes from memory. Okay.
And um and they said, when we were writing this new album, if things kind of harkened back to our older days, we just embraced it. I think I've seen Mike say that 5 or 6 times in different interviews and stuff. And it's like, cool. That's great. To me, that opening might be a step too far, where it's like
Okay.
that sounds way too much like the beginning of scenes from memory. But that's where they made a judgment call and they said, this is what we're doing, we're liking it. But I listened to it again today and it bothered me less. So that was one of the downsides to Shadow Man Incident, but from that point forward, I think it's incredible. Um, I think there's some really cool riffs in there that follow that opening. I think that when the vocal comes in, the kind of slower guitar, kind of cleaner guitar stuff, it's like I haven't really heard them do that before. They're just kind of some new tonality in there. Um, I do think that kind of the middle section that has like these really cool sustained guitar notes, kind of guitar lines in it. It's kind of like right before it hits around the 10-minute mark. It's like that's kind of new. I haven't heard them do things like that before. And I think from about the 10-minute mark to roughly the 15-minute mark is arguably the best on the entire record. Um, it does have maybe a quick moment that's a little jazz handy, but it just works. I just think it's just so musically interesting from about 10 minutes to about 15 minutes and everything leading up, most of the stuff leading up to that first 10 minutes, I think is great. And the way the song ends is great. But there's that sweet spot from 10 to 15 that's just like
Hmm.
I think they're on fire. And I give this song a big thumbs up. I probably I'm not going to give it a 5 because that opening kind of bugs me just a little bit. So probably not a straight 5, but otherwise, yeah. So if I had to
Oh,
pick two songs, well, if I had to pick two songs, it'd be Midnight Messiah and Shadow Man Incident, and then followed by Bend the Clock and A Broken Man, and then the lower tier would be uh, Night Terror and Dead Asleep.
okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well, and this song is almost 20 minutes long, and you said you've listened to it at least 5 or 6 times, right?
yeah, about 5 times.
Okay, so for me, it's only been two.
Hmm.
So this is an example where there's a lot going on, and I probably needed more time to digest it. My initial impressions were I wasn't sure. Dream Theater can be very self-indulgent, right? I
Hmm.
mean, when you're as good as they are musically, they can be. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes it's kind of like, all right, guys, I'm not really sure that piece fits in there. So I'm still trying to figure out if the pieces really fit together on this track because there's a lot. Would you agree there's a lot of different stuff going
Yeah.
on there?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I'm going to go back and especially listen to the 10 to 15 minute mark because you said it might be the high water mark on the whole record. So I got to go back and revisit that. But I remember thinking to myself, I was kind of going through that experience and listening to the song because I think when a song is 20 minutes long, it is an experience.
Hmm.
There's a lot going on. It waxes and wanes and what have you. And I just wasn't sure if everything. I was like, is this one of those examples where we got to do this? Let's throw that in there, or well, let's put this. It's like I wasn't sure if it all worked, so I need to go back and revisit that. The one thing I did not like about it, I hated it.
Mm.
The wake up. I hate that. I hate the way
Oh,
the record is like that. I
okay.
cannot stand it. I wish they would have just gone back to doing like sounds like night sounds, like maybe cars driving on a street, kind of ending more like the way the record started. But that whole thing with the alarm and the wake up, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe they went there.
Okay, and to your point on that, I actually agree with that. I
I
actually
hate
agree
it.
with that. I agree with that. Um, um, there's enough space. It's funny because I said I just listened to this today. I was driving home when I was listening to this, and I actually, when the song ended, um, I just clicked to something else before that little wake up thing. I'd actually forgotten that it was there, and I do agree with you. I think actually going back to the like just nighttime sounds of some sort would have been cooler.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's what they're done.
it's almost like it just kind of borders like on almost like a cliche or something. Like, oh, of course they did that.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I listened to it, I was like, I hope this doesn't happen. And then I was like, oh my God, they did it. I'm like you said, it was so predictable. And
Yeah.
I thought it cheapened it. I'm like, if they could have just ended it with some, just something ambient, something
Hmm.
organic,
Hmm.
not an alarm with somebody going, wake up. It's like, oh my God. No, yeah, that knocked it down a whole half a star for me at least. I know that's maybe being harsh, but this is the end of
Well,
the record,
I
and you
okay.
can't, in my
I
view, you can't end a record like that. I
now okay. In fairness, though, because I do agree with you on that. However, however, that little thing in and of itself is not part of the song proper, right? It's not. I mean, it is because it's part of the track, but it's not like it's something within the body of the song itself.
No, but you are deciding. They made a decision that that's the way they wanted this album to end. The last thing that you're going to hear is that, unless you do what you did, which I might do from now on, because I was so annoyed with that.
Well, you
Um,
can do that. You know.
and again, I would say from a production standpoint and from a writing, I mean, I would have been like, I would tell the guys, that was in my view again. I'm just one guy, but that's a terrible way to end a record. That's it's predictable, it's cliche, and it would have been so much better if you would have done this. Now, I respectfully disagree with what you guys did, but I just do not like it at all.
Mhm.
I mean, if this were a record that we had done, I'd be like, there's no way. I do not support that. Now, if I would have been outvoted, I'd live with it. And maybe it was put to a vote, and maybe there were some guys in the group that didn't like it. But I wrote that down in my notes that I just absolutely hate the ending of the song. Now, the rest of it, I got to go digest it some more because there's so much going on.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go back and particularly listen to Midnight Messiah and this track again. And I made some notes about some of the things that you mentioned because I want to give and I'll be listening to the record more as we
Mhm.
get further into it. But that's my initial impression.
Yeah.
I expect kind of more out of the epic than what I got, but I've only listened to it twice.
Well, and like
So
like we said before, I mean, sometimes you just need time to digest these things more. But you're going off of
yeah,
a first, second impression, and um,
yeah.
so and like I said, I've
Let me
listened to
just
it
make let me,
5 or 6 times. So yeah.
yeah. Let me make just let's just maybe wrap up by talk making maybe making some general observations about the record as a whole. And
Mhm.
I can go if you want me just to kind of
Yeah. Go
start.
ahead. Yep.
Um, Sequencing. I think overall the sequencing is good. I think
Hmm.
there is a fair amount of light and shade on the record. There, like, we talked about John's various styles of guitar playing and soloing. It's not all just, the prog metal that they're really well known for and that they do really well because they do everything well. These guys can do anything. And like you said earlier, I like it when John delves into his emotive style of playing, like songs like The Silent Man, for example, just beautiful songs that they're able to write, and there's some of that on this record. So there's a little bit of everything that we love them for is on this record. You mentioned, I haven't heard it with cans on,
Hmm.
but I made a note about the bass is lost in the mix. Well, you're saying if you listen to it with headphones, you kind of hear things, which makes sense, that you're not going to hear on my home stereo system.
Yeah.
I've just
To, and to that point, also, it's John Mayung's bass and his bass tone, and lot, especially a lot of times when he's playing in unison with John, it's it's there and you're hearing it. You're just not necessarily realizing that you're hearing it
It's not discernible.
because, well, it would be discernible if it was gone.
Right,
You know what I
but
mean?
what I'm saying is that if the riffs are on top of each other, like if you pulled it out, you'd notice it, but you're not. Oh, that bass sounds really good because you're hearing it really combined with the rhythm guitar
You're hearing it kind of as one thing.
as one instead of two.
Right.
Right. Um, I don't know that I would say this record is really self-indulgent. I do think there are times where Mike overplays with like some of the rolls that's like you have to have 56 tom hits when you're doing a roll, and the drums are really loud in the mix.
Hmm.
um so I think maybe there might be some, and again, he's a phenomenal drummer. Maybe a little bit of overplaying. Maybe he could have pulled back a little bit at times. Maybe he didn't want to. And from an artistic standpoint, that's their decision. I just made a note and thought to myself, there's a little bit of maybe some overplaying. Doesn't mean the songs are bad. I think maybe there could have been a little bit more. Sometimes less is more, right? And I think sometimes a song can benefit from what you don't play as opposed to what you do play. And we all know he's a phenomenal drummer, and sometimes I think he has a tendency to maybe just push a little bit. That's all I'm trying to say. It's not really a criticism, it's just an observation. I do think the record is a little bit claustrophobic because, kind of piggybacking off of that, there's not a whole lot of open, empty spaces. Like with the Shadow Man Incident, I feel like they kind of made sure that it's a 20-minute song and we're going to pack it full of stuff. I need to go back and listen to it again, but I think within the context of some of these songs, if maybe they could have opened up a little bit, maybe they would have benefited a little bit from that. The production overall is really, really good. The mix is good. Like I said, with maybe the exception of the bass, I can't detect it as well without headphones. And maybe I'll try to figure out a way to do that. And the sequencing is really good. So on the whole, um, certainly no problems with the production. I mean, every record they do sounds fantastic, and I'm sure you
Yeah.
would agree.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with everything that you're saying. I mean, the idea of kind of overplaying here and there, that never really occurred to me, and I don't necessarily agree with it. I do think that there's enough breathing from song to song
Okay.
and within the songs that I don't necessarily agree with. Um, the thing about bass, and I have a hard time discussing this with some people because there's a difference between talking about bass frequencies and bass guitar tonality, like as a distinct, like I'm hearing the bass as a distinct instrument versus I'm hearing low end. Clearly, there's low end on the album. Like
Oh yeah.
you're not saying if I'm hearing you right, you're not saying this is And Justice for All, where there's
No,
like
no, no.
it's a matter of I am I hearing John Mayung's fingers on the strings, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. That's why I think my favorite Dream Theater album from a mix standpoint is Distance Over Time, because I really hear John Mayung's presence on that record. Again, not that these other albums, this new album, I mean, there's bottom end, there's low end, there's
Oh,
bass from a frequency standpoint. It's just I could discern his playing more specifically on headphones. So yeah, yeah. I do understand what you're saying about that. So yeah, overall I give it a thumbs up. I don't know if it's the best thing that they've ever done. Um, they're hard to top. So,
yeah.
but I think it's a good record. I think 2025 is off to a good start, and you know, we've got some other stuff coming up. There's a new Pattern
We
Seed
do.
Animals album that just came out. There's you
Envy
know,
of None album comes out in
and
March.
gosh, Envy of None. Pentagram just put out a new
Smith
album. There's more to come. More to come.
Smith
And
Kotzen has a new album coming out in April.
yeah. So
So yeah,
anyway, yeah, if we've kind of gone on longer than I think we expected to, but if you have Checked out the new Dream Theater, have thoughts. If you think we're way off base, that's cool. Everybody listens with their own, ears and their own brain and their own perspective. So, but like, subscribe, check us out. We're part of this, and what we write and record is nothing like Dream Theater, just to say.
No.
So the only thing that we do that's proggy at all is it's a kind of a conceptual project. It's okay. But we have recordings out as Underlords of the Overworld and Friends. And
Yes.
these are some of it's instrumental, some of it is lyrical, some of it is conceptual. Our bass player writes novels in a fictional universe. Um, he writes under the name H. Prescott Lemon. They're fun stories if you're a reader, and the music is just a nice accompaniment to that, or vice versa. And you can find his stuff on Amazon. I'll put links below. You can find our stuff on Bandcamp and Spotify and other streaming services. We've done a couple of songs that had Derek Sherinian on keyboards, Dream Theater alumni.
Dream Theater.
So that was kind of cool. That was
Hmm.
an awesome experience. We also had
Yeah.
former Iron Maiden vocalist Blaze Bailey do a song with us, so that was cool too.
Yeah.
Feel free to check it out. Support local artists in your community if you want to support independent art for our channel. We don't really see ourselves as YouTubers. We're just kind of using YouTube as a forum to discuss the stuff that keeps us you know kind of being creative in our own right as
Yeah.
middle-aged dudes. So,
Or
uh,
as you said one time, hey, we talk about this stuff. Let's just start recording it. And I said,
mhm,
sure.
yeah, we're going to talk about it anyway. So we thought we might, throw it out there and, commune with people in the broader universe out there. So,
Like-minded people. We're going to commune with you.
yeah. So anyway, thanks for checking it out. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. If you're so inclined, leave a comment. And until next time,
Till
ciao.
next time.